Welcome to Straight from the Gavel. I'm your host, Dave Barber, coming to you this day from Room 35, the House Finance Room. And each and every week at this time, we like to invite a member of the General Assembly in and discuss some of the things that they have been working on and how it might impact you and me and every citizen here in Rhode Island. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome a gentleman who's making his first appearance on Straight from the Gavel. He represents the city of East Providence, the Honorable State Representative Greg Amore. Representative, it's good to see you.
No, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Rep and coach and teacher.
And dad.
And father,
yeah,
and all of those
and
things.
Husband, yeah.
All of those things are important. In fact, that leads me into my initial question. Give our viewers a little more background about yourself, both personally and professionally.
Sure. I've been a teacher at East Providence High School for 25 years in the social studies department. My focus is on advanced placement United States history, but I also teach American civics and government. I'm a lifelong East Providence resident. I coached the hockey and baseball teams at East Providence for many years. I was always kind of involved in politics on the local level behind the scenes. For about 4 years, I wrote a weekly column in the local newspaper. You know, I have my 2 daughters in the public schools in East Providence. One of them is with me at East Providence High School all the time. In fact, we travel in together. So at an early hour, so there's not much father-daughter conversation at 6:40 in the morning. You know, I've always appreciated what I got out of the East Providence school system, and I always appreciated growing up in such a great city, a diverse city. And you know, I decided I would run when the seat was created through redistricting, and it worked out for me.
Well, listen, it was also interesting for us because on the day of this taping, purely by coincidence, it happens to be the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And with your background in history and teaching young people about American history, today is significant to all Americans, of course. But what was it like in the classroom? How did you approach it with the kids? Because we're talking about kids that were, maybe even their parents weren't old enough to remember what happened. What kinds of things did you address with them?
So you're right on. So a freshman was born in 1999. So even their parents may or may not have had any firsthand knowledge of the assassination. We usually, in our history department, we usually mark the date, even if it's not an anniversary date. We mark the date if it falls in a school day. And it's part, you know, the Kennedy administration is part of our curriculum. But as you may know, today seems to be a day filled with conspiracy theories, right? I mean, the American people love a conspiracy theory, and our students really love conspiracy theories. You know, they have access to the internet all the time. They're on YouTube, they're here, they're there. So they're interested in the assassination, but really they're interested in the conspiracy aspect of it. So we deal with that, but most of our teachers today, including me, took advantage of the day to try to teach them about the legacy of John Kennedy, try to introduce them to the man, show some video clips of his speeches, of the inaugural address, of some of the press conferences that he conducted. You know, he conducted more press conferences than the last 3 presidents combined in full terms, and he did it in a shortened term. And so we try to give them a sense of who he was, so that it's not just about the shooting, so that it's not just about the assassination and the conspiracies that revolve around that. And for them, it's good because they're, you know, I grew up with John Kennedy, even though I was not born when he was killed. My parents were Kennedy fans, and so I knew about him. I'd read about him. This generation does not have that type of connection, so it's our job to do that. And it gives us an opportunity with this anniversary to kind of introduce him to the student body.
Well, you know, I was in the 3rd grade in Michigan, and I have a couple of connections to the assassination because the Warren Commission that was put together as this autonomous body to examine what happened, one of the members was Gerald Ford. And he was a member of Congress at that time from Grand Rapids, Michigan, my home state. And later in my adult life, in my adult career, I had a chance to talk to him about it. And then I got to know Melvin Belli, who represented Jack Ruby, who shot Lee Harvey Oswald. The Warren Commission said, listen, Oswald acted alone. After all of your years of teaching, all the lectures you've given, what's your take?
I agree. And I've spent some time with the Warren Commission report, and I spent a lot of time on Vincent Bugliosi's book,
Oh, right.
which was enormous. I mean, it was a slog to go through it, but it was really well done, and he countered a lot of the conspiracy theories that exist around the assassination. And I just, just looking at both those things, the commission report and Bugliosi's research, which was impeccable, I came to the conclusion that, yeah, he did it. We don't like that. Americans don't want to admit to the fact that one troubled person, can change the course of history. That bothers us, so we look for other answers. And I think that's natural, but I believe he acted alone.
There are some people that even suggest it was the assassination of President Kennedy that began this whole mindset of Americans that are suspicious of everything and started we see a conspiracy under every stone. And they could very well be right. I remember asking Mel Belli if he thought his client Jack Ruby could be part of a conspiracy, and he told me in no uncertain terms that he felt Jack Ruby was simply nuts, and that he never got paid for his work in representing Jack Ruby. He also wasn't very happy about that. But are the kids that you teach at their age, are they interested in this? Do they find it fascinating?
Absolutely. And I think what they found fascinating was the raw footage from the days following the assassination is so much different than what they experience in the media today. Oswald was paraded through the Dallas police station a number of times, not just the famous time that we see where Ruby pulls the trigger, but a number of times he spoke to the media at midnight.
Yes.
And there was a throng of media, and he was free to speak his mind there. So they were surprised at that. We mentioned before the taping that all the cigarettes that you can see in everybody's hands and mouths during this period of time, that surprises them. They've grown up around a kind of a sterile atmosphere. But they're interested, sure. And look, they're Rhode Island kids. So they come from the Catholic tradition, a vast majority of them. They know John Kennedy through their grandparents, through their great-grandparents, aunts and uncles. So there is a connection. And it's, like I said, it's important for us to make sure that the assassination is not the only thing that they know, that they can explore Kennedy's legacy, which is tremendous considering the short span of time that he served.
Not only are you a scholar, but you're a politician, so I must ask you, just for your opinion, if John Kennedy had not been assassinated and he had indeed been elected to a second term, would our country be dramatically different?
I think there's certainly a possibility that the Vietnam conflict may have developed differently. There's a fair amount of evidence that he was a little squeamish about accelerating troop involvement there, and so I think just that alone may have made a tremendous difference. I think, you say politician, and today people hear politician and it's a negative connotation. And one of the things we pointed out to the students today was that in the Kennedy era, it was a positive. He was following someone who had served honorably, Dwight Eisenhower, in the military and then as president. And he was someone who had served honorably in the military. And people accepted the fact that politicians at that time were serving their country. And we've kind of lost that today. There always seems to be cynicism in regard to political ambition.
That's an excellent point. I can remember vividly as a kid going into many homes, friends, family, neighbors. It was not uncommon to see a picture of Jesus Christ and John Kennedy, or Dr. King and John Kennedy, hanging on the wall in many people's homes.
Absolutely.
Because they held those folks in such high regard. Well,
yeah, including my relatives.
Well, it had to be interesting in the classroom today. Thank you for taking some time to talk to us about that. Let's get down to some of your work here in the General Assembly. You have your first year under your belt. Was it what you thought it would be?
No, I mean I think you have an idea of what you think it's going to be, and it's much different in real time. I mean, I have a little advantage in that I come from a background where I teach American civics and government, and I've taught Rhode Island history. But the dynamics of the entire situation, you're not prepared for that because you've never been there before. It's like anything else. The more you're there, the more wisdom you get, more institutional knowledge you get. But I found it exciting. I find it humbling. I walk into this building. Every time I walk into this building, I I feel humbled by the fact that this is such a historic place, and we're given the opportunity to do the work that is supposed to promote the general welfare.
Well, and when you speak of the general welfare, in your first year, you had legislation signed into law that deals with cancer patients. That was important to you. Tell our viewers about that.
So that was the oral chemotherapy parity legislation that I proposed based on my personal experiences with my wife's battle with breast cancer, and she's doing fantastically well right now. But I met a lot of people who shared that concern with me, that there were a number of patients that could not receive the proper treatment they needed because of costs, because their oral chemotherapy was so much more expensive than the traditional chemotherapy. And so I started to research the issue. I looked at other states who had addressed it, and I started to really focus in on that one thing because I thought that would immediately help some people who needed that help. When you're sick like that, you want to get better. You don't want to worry about anything else. You don't worry about costs or decisions on medication. You want to worry about getting better. And so I laser focused in on that. I had tremendous support in the House for my efforts, and fortunately it worked out.
And you should be certainly congratulated on that. I know the Speaker, Gordon Fox, has also kind of put you on a mission of attending some conferences and going to meetings and studying what's happening in other states and what other state legislatures are doing, and bringing back some good ideas. I know one of those conferences that you attended dealt with the issue of addiction. What can you tell us about that? What did you bring away?
I just returned from Atlanta. It was a 3-day conference on the study of addiction, the science behind it, and some policy that can deal with those that are suffering from addiction, how they can best be treated, and how to support their recovery. And as a member of the HEW committee in the House, I'm dealing with these type of issues all the time. It was an education for me, but I think it was very valuable because it allowed some of the state policymakers. Secretary Costantino was with me there, other members of the State Department of Health. And I think what it does is it brings legislators into connection with the people who are running these departments, and it helps us kind of craft legislation based on their knowledge and needs. We've looked at addiction for a long period of time in this country as something other than a health issue. We look at diabetes as a chronic health issue. We don't look at addiction that way. That's starting to shift. There's been more positive discussion along those lines. But I think under the ACA, which is getting hammered right now, under Obamacare, you have an opportunity here to kind of infuse addiction treatment with primary care. And a lot of coverage involved now that was not involved in many insurance plans will now support people who are facing that situation. And Rhode Island has an issue with some prescription drug overdose.
We index very high.
We do.
Nationally in terms of addiction problems. Right. So I would think this conference you attended would be pretty important.
So yeah, we spent 3 days trying to brainstorm and get we had professors from Wake Forest University who are experts in this field. We had physicians. We had a host of people who were speaking to us. But the idea behind the conference was to brainstorm and get to some action plan that can start to make a dent in some of those statistics we referred to.
I know that mayor of Toronto has been the brunt of jokes by late-night comedians, and of course we've all seen the videos of his bizarre antics and his admission to smoking crack. And although this gentleman clearly is in no position to be running a major city, this gentleman also needs treatment. This gentleman's ill. Right. And it's hard for me when I see somebody like that is in that kind of a dire situation to make fun of them or to find humor in that, because addiction is real. It is, in fact, a disease, and we have to start finding ways of making treatment more accessible for folks in order for their way to get through this and recognize that they're powerless and they need help.
I don't think there's a family in America that hasn't been touched by addiction of some sort. So it's present. And look, we've come a long way. It was just say no. We looked at it as a moral dilemma or a weakness. I think we're moving to the fact that this is a disease and it should be treated as such. If I take my high blood pressure pill in the morning, well, that's no different than treating my addiction. And so I think that's kind of where our policy focus needs to be. There are some peripheral things we can do in the short term, but that's where the long-term focus needs to be.
I remember that campaign by Nancy Reagan, and I know her heart was in the right place. But telling people to just say no is like telling a manic depressive to just cheer up. Right. I mean, it's serious, and dopamine and its effect on the brain is very, very serious. Correct. And to the drug addict, that drug is as important to them as breathing oxygen. Correct. And so that was good that you attended that. Also, you attended a conference on early education. And again, that would be a good fit for you, being an educator. We all know that it's important. How important?
Well, I truly believe that the biggest answer to our educational problems lies in early intervention. And I worked on my master's thesis in this area. And we've seen in pockets around the country where when we target early intervention, and it's a whole host of things. It's not just preschool or education. It's meeting and talking with parents, setting up a plan. It's prenatal care. It's health care going forward. It's dental care. Getting students who are able to learn. They can come into the classroom, but if they're hungry, or if they're tired, or if they're cold, or if they have some sort of problem, asthma. I mean, we look at the numbers of students who miss school days, especially in the urban districts, because of asthma, based on the fact that they don't have accessible health care. So this is really a focus that I believe in. I believe we've kind of moved around the edges in education reform. And so I was fortunate enough, the speaker nominated me, and I was accepted into the Early Fellows program, Early Education Fellows program. And that started last session. It's going to continue through this session. And there are some good policy initiatives that will come out of that. I hope to propose a couple as we begin session in January. But it's paramount. Early education I look at Florida. I always give Florida as the example, Dave. They instituted a universal pre-K, voluntary universal pre-K, and they saw their NAEP tests, National Assessment of Educational Progress, they saw those scores go up without anything else. I mean, you can look at all sorts of initiatives, but this one works, and I think we really have to focus on it.
Well, speaking of tests, nobody is more qualified to address this next controversial topic. In fact, we covered a special commission on the kneecap testing. In fact, I think you may have even been there, as I recall. What about this kneecap business? Where do you stand? You're in the trenches every day. What needs to be done? Are we on the right track? Are we on the wrong track? Do we need to make some adjustments?
The kneecap's design is so that teachers and administrators can see where students are falling short. They can see what students have excelled, and they can design curriculum and interventions based on those shortcomings. And this kind of data is really valuable, and it can be used to guide instruction. It can be used to guide curriculum, and that's the essence of the kneecap test. We decided in this state to use it as a graduation requirement. It was never intended for that purpose. It's not made for that. In fact, it's very clear. The publishers say it on the second page, that this is to guide instruction and to guide curriculum. It's not to be used for promotional reasons or for graduation requirement. So I come down very clearly on the side of the students who say this should not be used as a graduation requirement because it hasn't been validated as such.
Well, at that public forum, just about everybody, maybe with the exception of one person, agreed with you. They were saying the same thing, right, that it shouldn't be a graduation requirement. So what's going to end up happening?
Yeah, I wish I could say. I think, look, we don't want to confuse people either. Students are allowed to take the test again. They're allowed to focus on the part of the test that they did not reach partial proficiency. And if they show improvement, then they will be able to graduate. Now, there's a number of ways to show improvement. I don't know what those numbers are going to look like. They just took the tests, so and some seniors will take the tests again. But the tool itself is the wrong tool, and that's where the debate should be. It shouldn't be about high standards. We all want to set high standards for our students. It shouldn't be about an exit exam. I'm not opposed to exit exams per se. The New York Regents test has been validated. This one has not. And in fairness to the students and the teachers, our curriculum has not aligned with these kneecaps completely around the state, within the last 5 years. I mean, it's you know, hodgepodge. It's been in some places, not in other places. But we're basing our students' success on whether or not they had the curriculum in place to support their success on this test. So there's a number of issues that I have with the test. I hope that we don't use it in this way. I hope that students, you know, show progress, because I've met students, I've had students who have scored proficiently or even proficiently with distinction on the reading aspect of the test, have not scored well on the math aspect of the test, are in college now and are succeeding. So to make this test to be one of the determining factors as to whether or not you graduate is unfair in a lot of ways.
As we look back at the last session, sometimes it can take years to get legislation passed. You worked on something that was unsuccessful, and I'm curious to see if you'll bring it back again in 2014. It involves the ignition interlock system for people that have been charged with drunk driving. What happened with that, and will you be reintroducing it?
I will be reintroducing it. Before I got here, Representative Gallison, Representative O'Neill had proposed similar legislation. Mine is a little more strict, although ironically it's not as strict. The idea is on the first offense, you'll have an interlock ignition system installed in your vehicle, and you can get your license back immediately. And, you know, the length of time is the length of time to get that device installed. And what we found is that in states that do have these laws and they actively pursue this type of policy, you see recidivism rates go way down. A lot of times the judiciary wants to have some flexibility in their sentencing. I understand that. But I think we have to develop something where this is a tool that we use more often in the state of Rhode Island, because it not only helps the person who can't get to work, who's having a difficult time getting to work, it also gives their family peace of mind. And if the statistics bear out in Rhode Island as they have across the country, it'll lower those recidivism rates. And the people who are convicted of drunk driving, even if it's their first offense, the numbers tell us, and they tell us, that they've been caught for the first time. It's not the first time they're drunk driving.
You know, when I graduated from high school, the blood alcohol limit was 0.15. I believe a lot of the states were victims of extortion, because Bill Clinton said if you want to get the highway funding money, you got to lower the rate to 0.08. A 120-pound woman having 2 6-ounce glasses of wine in 2 hours, because of the way they metabolize alcohol in their system, legally will be over 0.08. I have a little trouble with that. Have you had any pushback from the hospitality industry?
You know, it's funny, when the testimony was heard, there was no pushback from the hospitality industry, and you make an interesting point, and it's a legitimate point in many cases. But what we also have seen in the research is that one drink causes some impairment,
Sure.
and the idea is to have people enjoy whatever social drinking they want to enjoy, but be safe on the roadway. So I think, and remember, we're talking about this would mostly affect these repeat offenders, people who have done this time and time again. Maybe they haven't been caught, but it would affect the repeat offenders, those people that are abusing alcohol.
There's no question. And again, you're seeking safe roads. Right. And we have this segment of our population that are just chronic abusive drinkers. And no matter how aggressive you make the laws, they're going to try to find a way around it, violate it, whether they have a driver's license or not.
Well, that's what we know. We know they drive.
Yeah.
And that's why the ignition lock system is a way to combat that. Because we know they drive anyway. They lose their license, but they drive.
Exactly.
And in some states, they require that device to be in all of the family's cars. They have to show proof that they've done that. In some states, insurance companies are reducing the cost for young drivers if their parents install one without a court order.
And again, you know, we've instituted these laws about texting and driving, right. And we know how dangerous that is. There's been a lot of research that says that even talking on a telephone can be sure. tantamount to having a couple of drinks after work on your way home because of the distraction that it causes. Right. But certainly we have to do something to make our roads and streets safer.
So we'll put that in again, and we'll defend it again. And we had Mothers Against Drunk Driving come out in favor of it, state police, and hopefully we can come to some sort of compromise. I go back to the oral chemotherapy bill. Blue Cross did a great job in coming to the table and working with us to create legislation that worked for everybody. So hopefully we can do that here with this bill as well.
The Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, they want one size fits all. First-time offender, fourth offender. If you're arrested for speeding and you're going 70 miles over the speed limit, your penalty is greater than if you were 10 miles over the speed limit. There has to be some kind of equity here in the administration of this.
And if you look at the bill that I proposed, it's a graduated bill. So things get worse for you as you go along.
Now, you also serve on municipal government. Local communities, their economies are very important. Communities are feeling a lot of pain. What do you see going forward with your work with municipal government?
So I had a unique perspective coming from East Providence, where we had a state-appointed budget commission.
Yeah, that's right.
In charge of our finances, and things are going well in East Providence now. We have a surplus this past fiscal year. It's eye-opening to me because that's not my area of expertise, and I worked hard to understand the legislation, to know what was going on before I got in there. And I think what municipalities want from us is the ability to save money, still provide services, and not have us get in the way. And I think we addressed a number of issues during last session to try to help municipalities, and Woonsocket in particular, but others as well, so that their tax structure can be changed, so that it's a little easier for them to designate tax differentiation. And so I enjoyed my time on that committee. I look forward to it. I think Chairman DeSimone does a good job. And I think we did some things to help municipalities through this very difficult time. And I think our budget did a great deal to help municipalities.
Now, as you get ready for the session, which is right around the corner, have you set the top of your head what some of your priorities will be as you move into session 2014?
Well, I'd like to address some of this early education stuff. I know that Senator Gallo is also a fellow with me. I think we're going to try to focus on some actual early intervention where we can put into some policy where we're getting kids before it's too late. If you move into the 4th grade and you're still struggling with reading and mathematics, you're going to struggle forever. We talk about schools that are failing. Well, schools really don't fail. Those students somewhere along the line haven't got the skills they need. And we've got to stop closing high schools, which seems to me to be a waste of time, and start focusing on early education. So there are a couple of proposals that I'm going to work with Senator Gallo and with the information that I have from this fellowship that I'll submit. I also think there's a real need for some consolidation in education. And I have some proposals that I'd like to forward there as well.
In our last 15 seconds, I would be derelict if I didn't take the opportunity to ask you, how are the Bruins going to do this year?
Well, I've told a number of people that they have to look at the long scope here. This is a good team. In fact, I think this is a better team than last year's team, and I think when all's said and done, they'll be back where they were at the end of last year. It's a good team. I think they're faster, they're younger. I think the defensive core is much more offensive, so I'm excited, although I'm a little disappointed right now at the inconsistency.
Well, listen, Representative Amore, you've been a great guest, a fascinating input, too, about the Kennedy assassination and your work as a teacher in the classroom telling kids about it. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
And, of course, we could not do it without you. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dave Barber, and remember, you heard it straight from the Gavel.